Balkan Burger is a simple but delicious meal inspired by the wonderful flavours of char-grilled Balkan meats and roast capsicum in a delicious soft bread commonly found in the region. It's made up of 5 components. The bread, which is called a lepinja, it's a yeast-leavened flatbread. Next is the cheese, where we'll deviate from the traditional kaimak that's typically used around these kinds of flavours, and we'll use a salty, tangy substitute such as feta. I'll talk a little bit more about this and the various substitutes you can use later on. The third ingredient is diced onion, which is pretty much about as simple as you can get. The protein or burger patty is a meat called pleskavica. This is a absolutely delicious mixture of ground lamb, beef and pork with a couple of spices. And last but certainly not least, we have ayvar, which is a sauce made from roast capsicum, eggplants and oil. We won't be making our own this time, but you can find ayvar, which is absolutely delicious in a local deli typically. So we'll be using one of my favorite brands for that today. All in all, this is a pretty easy meal that you can scale up to feed a large group of people. The amount of ingredients that I use in this video makes approximately 6 burgers. A full list of ingredients can be found in the description. So let's get started. We're going to make the bread first. The first thing we want to do is activate the yeast. So in a small bowl, add 1/3 cup of warm milk, along with 1 tablespoon of sugar and 1 packet or 7 grams of instant yeast. Give this a good stir and let it stand for about 10 minutes. At the end of this time, the mixture should be frothy and bubbly. Then it's time to make the flour. In a stand mixer with a dough hook, add 3 cups or 430 grams of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of salt, the yeast mixture that you made before. You can see here how it's all bubbly and frothy. And 1 cup of warm water. Then you want to mix this for about 6 to 8 minutes on medium, or until it looks like it does in the video. If the dough doesn't look like it's coming together properly, feel free to add a little more water, but patience is key here. When your dough has come together like this, it's time to take it out of the mixer, cover it with some cling wrap and set it aside for about 1 hour or until it's doubled in volume. Now that your dough is resting, this is a great time to make your burger mixture so that it can rest a few hours in the fridge and help the flavors develop. It's totally fine if you do this just before you cook the patties, but it's worth waiting. So the first thing you're going to want to do is combine the meat in a bowl. I've got 500 grams of beef mince, 250 grams of pork, and 250 grams of lamb mince. I know it looks like we're making this out of the petting zoo, but bear with me, it's worth it. Next you'll want to add 2 cloves of minced garlic and 1 finely diced onion. Mine was a bit too chunky in the video, but it's not a big deal. And lastly, add 1 tablespoon of paprika and 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Get your hands in there and mix it all up. Then once it's all combined, cover it in cling wrap and let it rest in the fridge until you're ready to cook. About an hour after you mixed your dough, it'll be ready for a quick knead, and then it'll need to rest for another 45 minutes or so, or until it's doubled in size. You'll want to have a well-floured work surface and knead it for a few more minutes. This will really help the gluten develop. Once you've kneaded it for a few minutes, just put it back in the bowl, cover it up, and set it aside until it doubles in size. Just like this. Now we're ready to make the buns. Again, on a well-floured work surface, tip out the dough and find a way to cut it into roughly 6 pieces. You can watch me struggle to do that right now. Once you've cut it into equal pieces, it's time to shape the buns. I find it easiest to shape them by pulling and folding in the sides, then turning it over and pulling the dough down towards the seam that we created, so that it has a nice taut surface. Line your baking tray with some parchment paper and then flatten the dough balls. I find the easiest way to do this is to push them down with the palm of my hand and then carefully stretch them out. Next time I'll make this recipe, I'll probably stretch them out a little wider so they're bigger than what you see here. Now that the buns are shaped, let them rest for 20 to 30 minutes. This is also a great time to preheat your oven. Crank it up to the highest it can go. Mine was on just over 250 degrees Celsius. Once the buns have rested, chuck them in the oven with a bowl of water. Next time I'd probably put the bowl of water in a few minutes earlier just so it has time to heat up. These only take about 5 to 10 minutes to cook, so keep a close eye on them and make sure they don't burn. And voila! After a few minutes you should have these beautiful puffed up looking buns. Set them aside to cool and we'll start working on the burger patties. This part's really simple. Just take a decent handful of meat out of the mixture that you made earlier, shape it into a ball, and then squash it into the shape of a burger. To cook the patties, you want to preheat a pan to really hot and use an oil with a high smoke point. I'm using peanut oil here. Once your pan is super hot, just take your patties and place them in there. You can press them down to make them a bit flatter because they will start to contract as they cook. Let them cook on one side until they're really brown, and then flip them over and do the same thing to the other side. And then just let them rest for a few minutes before plating up. Now, onto the best part. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, this is a pretty simple sandwich. The first thing you're going to want to do is cut your bun in half and add a generous, and I mean generous, amount of ivar. This is a roast capsicum and eggplant spread that you really can't have enough of. You can find this in a lot of delis. You can always make it if you want to, but it is a ton of effort. After you've spread the ivar, throw on your patty, add some sliced or crumbled feta, and finally top with diced onion. Now, remember how I mentioned something called kaimak as what you can use on the burger instead of the feta? Well, kaimak is made by heating unhomogenized, unpasteurized milk, letting it cool down, and then scooping off the fat that comes to the surface. You then combine that with some salt, and you get a lovely, creamy, melty spread that works great in this burger. Obviously, that's a fair bit of effort, and it's not easy to find raw milk, and to be honest, the feta works great for me. So here you go, the final product. This is a delicious meal. It's fairly easy to make, and you can use it to feed a small army if you like. Enjoy.